Hey, this is Vince Papale. I'm a fellow Hawk brother, and of course, I'm the guy from Invincible. And you're listening to Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants right here on 1851. My Hawk brothers, and the Hawk will never die.
And we are back. This is Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants. I'm your host, Brett Suto, my co-host, Glenn Pantalone. And we are on live with former Houston Astros general manager, Tim Purpura. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing great. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to do it.
Now, as we all know, it has been a race in the AL West so far this season, and now it's coming down to the wire. What are your thoughts? We're seeing Houston and Texas and Houston. Who's going to come out on top?
Well, since I'm back with the Astros and scouting for the Astros, I have to say the Astros, and I truly believe it. I think there's, the nucleus of the young players is tremendous. The position players. You look at Altuve and just up and down the lineup, there's some great players there. And on the pitching staff, you got Dallas Keuchel, who's had a rough outing in Arlington the other day, but he'll bounce back from that. But they've got a pretty good schedule going forward. They play the Rangers again 3 more times at home, and as you probably looked at the splits between home and road, the Astros are a much better team at home and very comfortable there. We've got a large percentage increase at home as opposed to being on the road. So I'm just a big believer in the quality of the team, the caliber of the players, the staff people. I think A.J. Hinch is an outstanding manager. I actually visited with him yesterday. They were here in town, and I actually saw all 4 games. So, I just think the organization is at a point where, they've developed good young talent. It was painful, to go through all those years, those down years. But, I'm a big Astro fan, and I really think that in the end they're going to win out.
Now, in your opinion, you served as a general manager, and you also are now a scout with the Astros. Do you think with all the years of struggling, was it good draft choices, or was it even better scouting by the Astros and their organization to get these great guys to fill these positions and to create the lineup, not only the lineup, but the pitching staff we see today?
Well, drafting and scouting go hand in hand. You can't have good drafts if you don't have good scouts. And, the crew that Jeff Lunau has put together on the scouting side, has really made a big difference. And the way scouting has changed and drafting has changed in the last several years under the new basic agreement has really been a boon to teams like the Astros, who were willing to downsize or reduce their payroll at the major league level, but then be able to go out and have such large signing bonus budgets. I mean, when I was GM in like 2007, I think our signing bonus budget in total was about $2.5 million. Now, there were a couple of years where the signing bonus budget for the Astros was close to $12 million. So that has really been a big change in the ability of clubs, to get the top flight talent. But you have to go through a very difficult and painful time, and that was, losing 100 games 2 years in a row, and then in the 90s, a third year. So they went through that tough time, but now they've got just a load of talent that they've drafted and signed, and then you add in young players like Lance McCullers and Colin McHugh, and I mentioned Keuchel. There's a lot of talent there, and then also in the draft. Actually, Jose Altuve was a player that we signed when I was the GM, so he's kind of the only holdover. But to have guys like Carlos Correa, who's being compared to the talent of MVPs and Hall of Famers, and players like that, George Springer, what a great athlete he is. So they've scouted well and they've drafted well, and now they've reaped the rewards of that, with the kind of players that they have right now.
Now, you've worn a lot of different hats in your sports baseball career. You've worked as general manager, you've worked as a scout, you worked for Major League Baseball directly. What different aspects of the game have you learned, and how differently is it in all these positions?
Well, the interesting thing is that, as big as the baseball industry appears from the outside, it's really small, and the people you deal with, in all different facets, you see over and over and over again. I was talking to a scout last night who, by the name of Dan Evans, who I've known for probably 25 years, and he's been a general manager. He's been, assistant general manager. He's been a scout. I've seen him in different roles. When I worked at my first job in baseball full time was, with the Arizona Fall League, helping start that, and so that gave me my grounding as far as my relationship with people. And it's like I say, it's an industry where people stay in it for such a long time because you have to love this game to work in it, and by that I mean not just be a fan, because a fan comes to the game and half an hour before the game and leaves right after the game. If you work in baseball, especially if you're in the front office, and you've got a game tonight, you're usually in the office by 9:30 at the latest. Sometimes I would be there at 7:30 in the morning, and then you stay till after the game. Especially a general manager, after the game goes down to the clubhouse, visits with the manager, talks about any injuries that occurred. If we need to make changes, you bring players up, send players down. So you can be there till midnight. So it is a really taxing business, but it's because we love it all so much. It just keeps us moving forward. And the biggest thing is that we all like to compete. We're competitors, and that's the thing that baseball has done for me. From a personal point of view, is it's fueled that competitive nature, and it's given me the outlet for that competitive nature that I have. I can't compete on the field like I did when I was a kid, but I can compete in the front office and try to make good judgments and beat other teams to players by having good scouts, good player development people. Strength and conditioning coaches have really made a big change in baseball, and it's been very good. I think the new drug and steroid testing policies that have been put in place in the last several years have improved the game. So it's just when you're in the game, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing, because you're still interfacing with the same people over and over again. Whether it's the commissioner's office or the minor league baseball office. We call it the baseball family, and we do that for a reason, because we all know each other and have worked with each other, and everybody has different experiences, and it's really a fascinating industry, as I'm sure most professional sports industries are.
You talked about all these different intricacies of the MLB. How did you how did you learn about all these different aspects of the MLB? Was it just getting the experience?
Well, I was I got some good advice from a gentleman who his name is Roland Heeman, and he was a former general manager of the Chicago White Sox and the Baltimore Orioles, and he was the executive of the year 3 times. And I met him one day in San Diego, and I said, I'd really like to get into baseball. What would you recommend for me? And this was in the 90s, so it's a long ways away. But he said at that time, I'd go to law school because someday lawyers are going to run the game. And that's what I did. I went to law school at night. I worked during the day, and then I also got experience as an intern with the Angels in spring training. I used to go out to Mesa, Arizona for about 5 weeks and help out in the player development department. So, but during that time, there's the official playing rules is a book that you can buy at a bookstore, and it tells you what the rules are on the field. And it's a little, it's a paperback book. It's not real thick or anything, but the actual rules of baseball, which are called the Major League Rules, it's about a 6-inch thick book. And you basically you read those things, and you try to learn from what you see in the Major League Rules, And you have to know the major league rules. You have to know them, cold, because when you're making a player transaction, you can make a big mistake and lose players that way. The Boston Red Sox, famous story from years ago was there used to be a tender date where players had to be tendered a contract, and there still is today, but it's changed. Back then it was December 20th, and the Boston Red Sox tendered Carlton Fisk, their all-star catcher. They tendered him 2 days late, and because they tendered him 2 days late, he filed a grievance, and he was granted free agency, and he went on to the Chicago White Sox. So, you if you miss a date or a deadline or a rule, it can be catastrophic for you. And it's things are much better now. Now that technology has advanced, it's harder and harder to make a mistake because you've got the technology back up there for you.
Now, you spoke to the difficulty of getting into the sport and working your way up, basically. Well, you eventually got to that point of being GM of the Astros. Can you talk about the difficulty it is to be a GM as fans, as people just coming to the games watching? We don't actually understand it. Being in Philadelphia, the GM of the Phillies was recently let go, Ruben Amaro, and we just want to hear the difficulty, everyday tasks of a general manager.
Well, it really is a 24/7, 365-day-a-year job, and I can tell you with complete candor, when I was GM, I talked to our owner every day of the year. So Christmas, New Year's, holidays, we always talk because we're always trying to make our club better, and that's the part of it that people don't get, and it's tough on families because you're gone so much. You have the late hours that I talked about, or the long hours. But basically, the first task of it, usually that I had and every day was to review what happened in our minor league system, and usually you'll have 6, 7, or 8 minor league teams where you are responsible for all those players, and the manager of each team, in years gone by would leave a voicemail, a game report. Like 7 minutes, 8 minutes long, and so you'd have to listen to all those. So that was a good hour of your day right there. Now we've got it automated to the point where the managers input data into the computer. Computer sends it. It gets transmitted to your home base, Houston. In our case, it gets compiled in the morning by someone in the office, and it's on your computer and on your desk, by the time you walk in at 7:30 in the morning. So all the data's there, all the information about how, who played well, who didn't play well, commentaries and things like that. So, that's usually the first thing you do is check in on that. If you've had if you've had some struggles with your big league team, you might be having some further conversations with scouts about different options that you can pursue on the trade market. You're talking with other general managers, just about every day. And at certain times of the year, you'll like near the trade deadline, you might talk to a GM 5 times a day, if you guys are working on a deal. So, basically you're managing what I would consider 3 departments: the major league team, the scouting operation, and player development. And scouting is kind of actually trifurcated into 3 areas. Scouting is amateur scouting, professional and major league scouting is kind of a joint team, and then there's the Latin American and foreign scouting, and that's one area that has just burgeoned in the last few years. Is how much time is spent in Latin America, how much time is spent in the Far East, now even in Europe. So you've got people all over the world, that are scouting and sending you reports and information, and that's a big part of the job too. So those 3 main areas, can easily take up a day. But and then also dealing with the media is a huge part of the job now. Especially with all the different media outlets there are, online. You could have 12 to 15 calls a day, from members of the media or emails, asking questions and things like that. So the media is a real challenging part of it, just because of the volume now. And certainly our media market in Houston doesn't compare with, for example, Philly or New York. We don't have the volume, but we still, in that role, I still had numerous interview requests per day, and then also live television shots and recorded stories about players that they want your commentary on. So it's just you have to be a master of a lot of different aspects of the game, and I guess probably one of the most important is having a relationship with your owner and being able to keep your owner apprised of what's going on in the club. And some owners are very hands-on, some owners are not so hands-on. So, but it really depends on their personality and what they want from you. That determines how much you interface with them. So it's that's why all those aspects lead up to why it's like a 24/7 job, in that you just got so much responsibility every day.
Now we're seeing more nowadays teams building these super teams, GMs building these super teams. When you were with the general manager of the Astros, you built a team that went to the World Series with guys like Clemens and Pettit. You brought all these different players in, free agency trades. How difficult is that to get everything to work and all the cogs to fit?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult, and it's you have an idea of what you want your team to look like, and you fashion that in the off season, as you evaluate the season before. And so, to me, one of the biggest needs and the time you spend almost the most on is pitching. Finding the quality pitching, developing the quality pitching, trading for quality pitching. We had that 05 team had Clemens, Pettit, and Roy Oswalt on it, and that was when Roy Oswalt was in his prime. And so we had three dominant starters. And if you have three dominant starters, and you have a dominant closer, and we had Brad Lidge before he went to the Phillies and won a World Series title. So we had three dominant starters. We had a lockdown closer, and we had good guys at the back end of the bullpen, like Chad Qualls, who's back with the Astros after being hopping around to a couple different locations. So I think it all starts with pitching, but you also have to have the offensive prowess to score the runs. And at that time, we had Lance Berkman, we had Craig Biggio. In 05, one of the greatest players in Astros history, Jeff Bagwell, was down with what ended up being a career-ending injury to his shoulder. So he really didn't play much. He pinch hit and was DH in the World Series, but he couldn't play a position anymore because he couldn't throw. But and he had lost his power. But we didn't score a lot of runs that year. The bottom half of our lineup was. We had some great defensive players like Brad Ausmus behind the plate and Adam Everett at shortstop, but we didn't get a lot of power production from them or a lot of offense from them. So, and then if you're playing in the National League, the ninth spot is usually the pitcher. So, if you're 7, 8, or 9, 7, 8, and 9 is not real offensively, progressed, then you're gonna have some low scoring games, and we did. And the thing about our World Series that we actually are very proud of, and we just had a reunion for the 05 team about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But we lost the World Series by an aggregate 6 runs, which means we played 2 2-run games and 2 1-run games, and we had the leads in two of our games. So we didn't feel like we got blown out. A lot of people think we did, but we didn't. And that number of 6 aggregate runs still stands today as the lowest run differentials in World Series history. It was a tie with I believe a Boston Red Sox team, a long time ago. So So we didn't score many runs, but we pitched pretty well, and that's what got us to the playoffs. So I think pitching is really the most important part of roster building, because if you don't have the starters, if you don't have the bullpen, and the bullpen may be the most important in some ways, to have the right balance of lefties and righties and things like that. So.
All right, Tim, we know you have to go, but one final question for you. Us being in college, we would love to hear your thoughts. How does one break into the baseball industry, and how do you make your way up through the different teams or different throughout the league?
Well, there's two approaches that I think you can take, and what it depends on is what you want to do in the game, and there's really basically two parts of a baseball organization. There's the business side, and there's the baseball side. And the baseball side is player development, scouting, and the major league team, which I would call the talent side of the house. On the business side, there's marketing, promotions, sales, broadcasting. There's all kinds of areas on the business side. So you have to really look at the game and decide what you want to do in the game. And for example, if you're interested in the business side, probably the best entree to the business side is to start with internships at the minor league level. There's 165 minor league teams that are affiliated with major league teams, and they're run by minor league baseball. And minor league baseball holds holds the winter meetings every December, and at those meetings they have what's called the Professional Baseball Employment Opportunity Program, and it's a setup where teams advertise openings in their front offices at various levels, entry level, mid level, and you can actually interview on site for those jobs, and people get offered jobs at the winter meetings all the time, and you can also go online and to pbeo.com and look at that website as to how to get registered, and it actually runs throughout the year online, and it's in person in December. So, and that's, I think, the best way to get into the business side, whether it's PR, media, marketing, promotions, all that type of thing. On the baseball side, the real entry point right now is what I call video scouting, and most teams now have, at the minor league level, they'll have a video coordinator who basically, there's a company that has developed a product that major league teams have been buying, where they install 3 or 4 different cameras in a ballpark, a minor league ballpark, and they have a video coordinator, a video scout. He takes he runs that system. He tracks the pitches. He categorizes the pitches, as far as fastball, curveball, slider change. What kind of a break did it have? Where was the location? All of those things go into a massive database, and that's the real starting point nowadays, is video scouting. And the way you get those types of roles is to basically write to every team and put your credentials out there. Having some background in video helps, but it's not entirely necessary. Knowing the game of baseball is. You got to understand the game. You got to know the game. As far as how it's played on the field. And the other side of things now is the analytical side. Having a background, a major or minor in some analytically based field is a big part of what we do nowadays. The use of analytics is great in baseball, just like it is in probably every other industry. I've got a friend who's in the oil and gas business, and the analytics that they have now today are so much greater than they had 10 or 15 years in the oil and gas industry. So baseball's not any different. We've grown with the times, and we're now analytically based in many cases. But the difference between us and, let's say, the oil and gas industry is, in the oil and gas industry, you're looking for oil and gas. In the baseball industry, you're looking for players, and players are people. And Tony La Russa had a great saying one time that when you talk about a player, that they're men, not machines. And, so the analytics only goes so far because you don't know what's going on inside a guy's head, his heart, what happened at home. So there's a human element to the game that is very difficult to quantify, but a lot of other things are quantifiable, and we use that every day. So,
Tim, we thank you for your time. We appreciated the advice and everything that you taught us so far about getting into the Major League Baseball and working with the Astros. It was very interesting. We thank you.
As well as your own stories.
Oh, I appreciate it. Good luck to you guys.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
This concludes our podcast of Sports and Rants with Brent and Pants. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at Sports and Rants. Like us on Facebook. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. And visit our website, www.sportsandrantz.blogspot.com. It would help our rankings on iTunes if you rate and review our podcast. Thanks, and have a good day.